All right. So I'm just going to quickly, welcome everyone in. So yeah. So to those who've joined us last week, thanks so much for coming in again. It's always great to have a bunch of people watch these talks. And those who are new to Malaysian Research Insider, welcome. We're doing this every Saturday at the same time, and we hope to see you the next ongoing weeks. So my name's Anthony. I'm doing a PhD in the University of Nottingham. And yeah, I'll be your host today. So just to start things off, we are this program is actually co-organized by MBIOS, 100 Scientists of Malaysia, along with our media partner, Science Media Centre Malaysia. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our current speaker. She is doing a PhD in team dynamics and player psychology. She's looking at video games to understand how to help teams work better together. And actually recently, she actually presented at Barcelona on building trust using digital games. So without further ado, let's welcome Evelyn Tan.
Cool, thanks for that. I will share mine now. Okay, you see it? Cute. Hi everyone, so my name is Evelyn. Like Anthony said, I am looking at team dynamics and player psychology, and I'm using digital game teams. So a lot of my research is on video games. So very quickly, a little bit about the games industry. Anthony, why don't you take a quick guess of how much you think the game industry is currently worth?
I mean, I'm going to guess a huge number because, looking at how games have went so far. So let's see, music 19 billion and Anthony 101. Maybe 120 billion? Am I overestimating it?
No, actually.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot more. So actually the games industry is a lot bigger than music and entertainment combined.
Wow, that's crazy.
And the question is who actually plays games? Well, according to the latest stats, there are over 2.5 billion people who play games. And for anyone who doesn't know, the world population is about 8 billion at this point. And while there is a very common perception there used to be a common perception that it was mostly men who play games, the stats show that actually it's almost an even split and people of all ages play video games. So why digital games? Again, I'm on this PhD program. It's a 4-year PhD program called IGI. It's funded by the UK government and I am fully funded, so my tuition fees and my living cost is covered. And this is a full name, it's a Center for Doctoral Training in Intelligent Games and Game Intelligence. And it is a very diverse games research group. So this is my research group. There are actually over, as you can see, a lot of us, there are over 60 of us in this group. And that's me there. Yeah. And so my research group is there are 60 of us and we spread across 4 different universities in the UK. And we are all doing very, very different things. As you can imagine, if there are 60 of us doing the same thing, I don't really know how that would work.
I don't think a lab can fit all you in.
Yeah, and this is my cohort. So because I'm part of a doctoral training program, it's very cohort based. And in my cohort, there are 16 of us. And just to show you the diversity of what we do. So for instance, this is Timea, and she looks at board games, and she's looking at how to have audio accompaniment for board games. And this is Matt. So Matt looks at, oh, that's Matt. Matt looks at how games can change our perspective. And this is Ryan. So he looks at neural networks in games and how to use that to create realistic images. And this is Martin, who looks at game AI. So as you can already tell by the short introduction of just 4 people besides myself, we all do very different things. So what do I research in this big group of games research? I'm looking at team cohesion, where cohesion is actually, it's this reason why people choose to stay in a team. The formal definition it is an attraction or bond that team members have because of the commitment they have to the task or because of their relationships with their team members. So cohesion is, simply put, why people choose to stay in a team. And in the literature and in industry, team cohesion is viewed as this secret sauce that high-performing teams have, but we don't actually know how to get it. So team cohesion is so desired that it is there's like maybe 5 or 6 different meta-analyses on the topic. And that's a lot for one topic of one element of team research. And despite all this research, we still don't know how to get it. And one of the main reasons is because team cohesion research has largely been done using surveys. And surveys have their benefits. They are very good and very easy to administer, but they don't capture the fine-grained dynamics of how things occur. And so we know that team cohesion is this thing that comes about as team members interact. And so because it comes about as team members interact, there's this element of time. But surveys are not able to capture the element of time. Surveys are pretty good at telling you, giving you a high-level overview of how different things relate to each other. So like, how does cohesion relate to performance, for instance? So the second one is like, because it has this element of time, to really understand how cohesion comes about and how it affects the things it affects, you need to look at fine-grained real-time data, but we don't really have that in the real world. And therefore, we just mostly use surveys. So the ideal scenario or ideal context to research team cohesion would be one where you could track a team from the moment it exists until the moment it disbands, and where you can track everything that happens in between. So all the interactions between members, all the interactions, all the outcomes of those interactions, and how those interactions subsequently shape cohesion over time. And what kind of context has this kind of ideal research situation? Video games. So this, for anyone who plays the popular mobile game Dota 2, this is a summary of, of course, on Anthony, you play. So if you play Dota 2, you realize that at the end of the match, you have like a match analysis with like lots of graphs and stuff. Well, this is like a third-party platform where you can go into even more detail about your match. And this kind of information is so valuable because it tells you like the entire duration of a match, who was involved in each team fight. So like who was involved in a team-based event, how did the interactions between teammates lead to certain outcomes. And then you can start seeing like how these outcomes would affect things like performance, but how it would also affect things like the players' perception of how cohesive their team is. And so then when you look at a platform like this, and you can see what happens in real time over time, when you give a survey at the end of cohesion, you can then say, okay, cohesion at this time was like this because of all these other events that happened that preceded it. So, and that's kind of the value of why I chose to do research on teams within video games as opposed to keep it with real world teams. So yeah, like I mentioned, that was Dota 2, and I'm generally interested in teams within the MOBA genre. So MOBA stands for Multiplayer Online Battle Arena, which includes games like League of Legends and Overwatch to an extent. And so the type of teams that I look at, the type of structures that these teams have is that they are high tempo and they have high interdependence. So meaning that everyone on the team has their own specialized role and everyone relies on each other to get things done. Because it's so fast-paced as well, and because everyone has a specific role, it requires good coordination and communication, as most people who play these games will know that a team is much better if we can actually coordinate together. And in some sense, there's also high consequences, because if you play League or Dota, you know that a mistake by any one of your teammates or a poor team outcome is severely punishing for your actual like match outcome. So in that sense, there is these structures of these teams. And I kind of want to ask the people, the audience, and you as well, like, can you think of any other real world teams that share a similar structure? So if you can have a guess of what sort of teams might function in this way as well.
Startups, firefighters, yeah. Football,
Sorry?
yeah, football's a good one. Looking at the chat box right now, we have football, startups, businesses.
Yeah, exactly. So these teams, well, I guess most closely you look at like football sports teams is a very obvious parallel. But you can also look at more high-risk teams like emergency response or medical teams, where they really share very similar structures. And in the teams literature, when you look at teams, when you study teams, you need to break them down first or characterize them first by the tasks that they do, their structure and the environment that they work in. And when you understand those, then you can understand what the theoretical links are between different factors and different outcomes. And so using that same line of thought, if we understand teams and teamwork within this context, there's a chance, at least a good chance, that the work that we do in this context of digital game teams may be able to generalize to real world teams that share a similar structure. So I get this question a lot about like why I'm studying digital game teams. That's why I feel
I'm sure you do.
that there is some similarity. Okay. So how do I do this research? What's in my toolbox? I use a bunch of stuff. No one method is better than the other. It's always best to use a bunch of different methods because they all help you answer different kinds of questions. So I've conducted interviews to understand like what's going on and why something's happening. So like most recently, I interviewed 15 players. Some were from Reddit, some were from a university, about how they became friends with strangers, for instance. And then again, surveys again, like I said, pretty good for understanding a high level overview of what the relationship is between two different or multiple different factors. But the beauty of working in games is that there is this gameplay data, telemetry or behavioral metrics, whatever you want to call them. And this really helps to answer how do all these high level relationships actually manifest as behavior? And importantly, how does it change over time? So for instance, here is a not very pretty graph of two teams in Dota, the Dire and the Radiant, and all their chat logs. So all the chat view comments that were given. And so you can see the frequency between so each of these keys are different like instances. So like number 9, I think, is when someone says missing top. And I think 71 is when someone says hero is missing. So like sniper is missing, for instance. And you can kind of see like how much communication happens between these two teams. And then you can also see how this happens over time. So on the x-axis here, I didn't really make much effort into labeling it and making it pretty, but on the x-axis here, it's the time within the game. And you can see how each communication instance is spread about over time. And so when you look at it, is where you can look at things like, okay, in these two teams, there were different communication frequencies and there were different communication distributions. And which team do you think won, purely looking at their communication? If you had to guess.
All right, some people have said blue, which is Dire. So
yeah,
most
so
people,
actually, the Radiant team, the orange one, won, and they had much less communication. And that's a really interesting thing. It's like, oh, okay, so we would typically expect that a team that has more communication would be better and therefore they would win. But in this game, the team that had less communication won. And so you want to know like what's going on. And you can also look at things like, okay, so in this 71 here, lots of people were pinging heroes were missing. And then in this number 9 here, this is all like in a certain section of the game, and this happened almost in parallel. You can see like number 9 was when people were saying missing top. So like lots of people were missing on the map at that time. And then you can go back into the game data that I showed much earlier and see what happened in that time. Who died? Was there a team fight? What was the increment of gold or kills? And so going back to the question on how this relates to team cohesion, when you can start to segment all these events out, and from the cohesion literature, we know that cohesion changes as a result of the interaction between team members. We can see, okay, in this event, when this team fight happened, what was the outcome of the team fight? Did like 3 or 4 heroes die? How did that then affect the feeling of cohesion in the team? And so then maybe at all these little dots, when some team event happens, the level of team cohesion changes. So that when you measure cohesion at the end, you're like, you will see like a cohesion graph, which led to the end state cohesion. And so use a bunch of these things to understand what's going on, what's the relationship, and how does it manifest as behavior and change over time. So what's a day in the life? I do a lot of reading. These are just some papers that have been published, not by me, by other people, but we stand on the shoulder of giants, on things like Dota 2 and Counter-Strike, on how to make the best team, how do you measure cohesion. I play a lot of games as well. This is not me, again. I'm nowhere this good at making triple kills and double kills. I'm pretty bad. But I play a lot of games, and when I play them to de-stress, but I also play to think. When I go in and I kind of test my ideas of what might be going on and how things might change. And I think it's really important if you're a games researcher to play these games, because then if you're only looking at it from the outside, you might not really know what's going on. Whereas if you're actually a player, then you can understand how your work might also affect players, since you are a player yourself. I also design experiments and run pilots. So for example, this is one of my friends who's piloting a study from me. It looks like he's just playing Dota, but actually he's hooked up to a heart rate machine. And in the next room, I've got another friend also playing Dota, also being hooked up to a heart rate machine. And I was trying to pilot a crazy idea about physiological linkage. So there's this like little machine, which I can't see very clearly, but it's there. And then I also try and gather data and do a lot of cleaning. So yeah. So I guess that's the end of like what I do and why I do it. And I suppose people might be wondering like how I ended up in this space. So I actually have a background in psychology. I did psychology in my undergrad, and then I did a master's in organizational and business psychology in my master's. And then I ended up in a PhD. So, but in more detail, I was curious. I was curious because in my undergrad, I met my supervisor, Professor Alex Wade, who has done some work on League of Legends. So he was giving a stats lecture, and there was a screenshot of League of Legends, and I was just very confused as to why I was there. But he's done some work with Riot Games to look at how in-game names predict social interactions and social behavior. And so then I approached him and said, hey, this is kind of cool. What can we do in this space? And I ended up doing my final year project on League of Legends and testing this really insane idea of whether League of Legends can make you better at math, mental math. And I did this by looking at people's brain waves. So this is actually a headset, which is an EEG machine, an electroencephalogram, by a company called Emotive. And so this is how my setup looked like. There was a participant who would come in, and they would wear this headset, which did not give out sound. It just scanned your brain waves. And then they would play the game, and then afterwards I would make them do like some math thing. And I guess I didn't really find anything, so the answer is probably not. Playing League of Legends probably doesn't really make math. And that's because the brain's really efficient. It only gives out resources for what it needs. And maybe League of Legends is more complex than math. Don't know. So that kind of got me curious, and I continued to feed this curiosity. So when I went and did my master's, I actually did it within the psychology department, but I approached a professor within human-computer interaction. Her name is Professor Anna Cox. And I tried to blend my interests on teamwork and games. So this is me and her at the conference that you mentioned earlier at Play. And with her, I worked on this final year project looking at how video games can be used to create trust or develop trust in teams. So at that time, I was very interested in using games with a purpose, where games would be used in the workplace for a different purpose than just playing games. And then I took time out and worked within HR technology for about a year. And in that time, I worked for a couple of companies that looked at game-based assessments, virtual reality training, and AI team coaching. And all these experiences kind of made me kind of continue to feed this curiosity. And then I met this guy, who's my other supervisor. His name is Anders, who wrote this book called Games User Research and has done some work on Dota too. And he did a piece of work that shows that there are differences in how experts and novice teams move across the map. And so he's really good when it comes to like big data game analytics type work. And so right now I work under Anders and Alex to do my research. So the question then is, am I alone? What happens after the PhD? Do I just stay in academia forever and keep researching in my bubble? But no, because actually there's a lot of psychologists already within the games industry you might not know so much of. So this, for example, is Mike Ambinder. He is the head of experimental psychology at Valve, which creates CSGO and Dota and Steam. And this is a really good video if anyone's interested on how psychology is used in games. So if you want, it's like a 1 hour chat, but it talks about how different psychological theories and frameworks are applied to influence and change and shape player behavior. Aside from this, there's also things like this. If anyone is also familiar with Dota and TI, the TI winners actually had a sports psychologist who is also an Olympic champion sports psychologist. So it kind of, I just wanted to showcase that there's a lot of like different diverse career options, that it's not just limited to some random lab in university forever. Like there are real world applications to the work that we do. And yeah, so to end, I just want to quickly say, if you want to participate, I am collecting a participant bank. So that means that when you click on the link and you sign up, then I will contact you. I will contact you if there are active studies. And if you play Dota 2, I've got a friend who's currently running an active study on, I think, like different cognitive abilities and performance or something like that. I'm not entirely sure. And if you also want, our group here has a subreddit running called R Games Research. If you want to populate the subreddit, that'd be great, because it's quite dead right now. And yeah, that's all that I have.
All right. So yeah, anyone's interested, like join a subreddit, try to post some stuff about gaming, like share your stories.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, thanks so much for the great talk. It was really interesting hearing about all the different like facets of gaming. All right, we have a question from Julian on Facebook. So I think this is pointing to that graph you showed. Was each team comprised of members of similar age group, or was it based on some other criteria like experience in certain game genres like FPS, MMORPG?
Specifically to that graph?
Yeah, specifically on the part where you were like, I think it was referring to that study on the pinging the keys.
Okay, so that wasn't really a study. That was me analyzing one of my games, and I was playing with my friends at the time. So we were playing in a 5v5 in that sense.
Okay.
But that's a good question, because then it's like, how much communication can you expect when you play with a team of friends versus when you play with a team of strangers?
Actually, on that point, I'm going to segue to a different question that someone actually asked. So Fadzli Woosley asked if I'd like to know if players play with their squad or with random players, because in a squad we understand how each other play, but we can plan better, but not so much when we play random players. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So actually, my research is much more interested in teams of strangers. So teams of opposed to teams of friends. So the reason is because team cohesion, you have a higher sense of cohesion when you play with friends, because you really have a pre-existing relationship. But what you really want to know, or what I really want to know, is how do we get to this level of like having this close level of cohesion? And to do that, you cannot look at pre-existing relationships. You need to look at a team where there's no relationship beforehand, and to see if they do develop these relationships over time. So to answer that question, my research focused explicitly on strangers, teams of strangers.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people like to follow your career then. Like, yeah, I think with random players, it's really interesting to see how people interact from like not knowing each other at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like some really early work that I've done already kind of shows that, and this is kind of in line with the literature on team cohesion, that like, so cohesion has two elements. So like I said, cohesion represents the reason why you stay in a team. So you may choose to stay in a team because everyone in the team is very good at what they do, but you don't know them, but you know that they're very good at what they do. And so if you stay in a team, there's more benefit for you because of the general benefit that the team brings in terms of achieving its goals. And then there's another part of cohesion, which is social cohesion, which is more of what friends have, more of what I believe me and my friends have, because I completely suck at these games. But they continue to play with me because they enjoy, I hope they enjoy my company. And so then the social cohesion bit talks about the emotional bonds and the social relationships that we have within the team. And so when you're playing with friends, you'll be more forgiving. You'd be, you wouldn't scold your friends as much. You would give them better advice, and everyone would interpret this advice as like positive. But that's because you already have that social cohesion that already exists. And that keeps people from like flaming each other if you're friends. Some friends do, I guess, but like most people wouldn't. Whereas if you're in a team of strangers, you don't have any of that prior relations, and therefore you're kind of like still every man for himself, even though you're playing a team game. And so I'm really interested in finding out how do we develop these different aspects of task and social cohesion. And the literature kind of shows that task cohesion will emerge first, and then social cohesion, which also I think makes sense.
All right. So yeah, another question by Julian. Do you also include lag in your research? So some people find that they get really stressed out when the game lags, and affects the emotion and decision-making process. Do you have anything to comment about that?
No, it's not something I've considered or really thought about. I think also because I believe game companies are trying very hard to reduce the latency or lag that players face. So it's not quite, it shouldn't be common.
Yeah.
It happens, but it
is quite annoying though.
Yeah, it is quite annoying.
So Elliot Howley asks, how can you separate out helpful pings whose aim is to inform the team from frustration pings who is aimed to vent, when people start like pinging on you?
Well, so if you play, it's pretty obvious which ones are helpful pings and which ones are angry pings. In research, it's not something I've done yet, but in research, you would usually, if let's say you're looking at large scale data, so you're looking at maybe thousands of matches and you want to look at ping data, what they would do is they would say like, okay, if the same ping happens within 3 or 4 seconds, then it's probably not it's probably not a communicative ping in terms of giving direction or help, and it could more be frustration. And then again, because there's so much data on like the events that have happened in the game, you can look at when these pings happen. These pings happen after someone died or before someone died. If it's after someone died, it's probably, who you directing the dead person. I don't know.
Yeah. Just pinging the body, just keep pinging the body.
Yeah, so people do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because like, especially in bigger data sets, it's going to be quite hard for you to slowly sift through each and everything. Yeah. A question by Alea: what is the future of VR in the conventional corporate workplace, perhaps for training purposes, as like VR is already used for training pilots? So any comments?
So firstly, I did a very short stint at the VR company, maybe about 6 months. Mm-hmm. But even in that time, there are certain industries that would benefit much more from VR training than there are others. So for instance, any industry that is very high risk. So in the company I was working at, we were really interested in teams like in the police force or medical, where training is very expensive, but necessary, extremely necessary. So in these industries, and maybe like in construction, or people who manage power plants, that is where VR training might be quite useful. Mm-hmm. In a game conference I attended last year, there was someone using VR to replicate a crime scene so that the judges and the panel who are reviewing that scene can go and revisit the scene without really revisiting the scene. Mm-hmm. So these kind of industries is probably much more, these kind of industries is probably where VR would benefit much more than the corporate world. But the company I was working for actually at the time, they were really interested in using VR for soft skills training. So how do leaders have difficult conversations with their team members? Or how do you diffuse a tense situation? How do you learn better? So using VR to train that it's also beneficial, but I think it's much more important in these other high risk industries where lives are at stake.
Yeah, and you can't easily simulate it without VR.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's really powerful.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much for that really good answer. Okay, from a question from Kimberly: do you work close with game development companies that will provide the data? Maybe like Steam or something.
So that's only if you need to. For example, so like with Dota, at least, you will notice if you delve into the research on digital games and team performance, you'll realize that there's a lot more research on Dota than there is on League of Legends, because Dota is a lot more, even though it's a smaller game than League of Legends, the data is much more available. So it's publicly available, meaning that all these other third-party websites that give you your post-game analysis, they're all pulling the same data that researchers are pulling as well. Mm-hmm. And so they don't work with the game companies themselves. They just like us, they just pull data that's already available. Whereas like maybe with League of Legends, they also have open data, but it's not as fine grained or not as mature. And if you want certain types of data, you have to go and approach the companies. So it really kind of depends on what you're doing and what you're trying to do and whether anything is already available.
Okay. I guess, yeah, it would be great if more game companies allow for more open source data for like, researchers like yourself to, tap into it.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay, Josh has a question. What do you think about far transfer? So improvements in game learning, transferring to other domains in your life. There is some weak evidence that, far transfer of game skills to any kind of cognitive abilities. But do you have any evidence of far transfer so far in cohesion, cooperation, communication, from the game context to, real life work context?
Okay. So with the answer is maybe.
Okay, that's a good answer.
I don't entirely know, but I know that there has been some work on how Okay, so for context, a lot of research on teams in digital games and team communication and cooperation, all these things, have actually been done within World of Warcraft. Mm-hmm. So in World of Warcraft, there are lots of guilds that last for months. And because the World of Warcraft is also a much older game, a lot of research has been done on how these guilds, how the structures of the guilds affect the players, and how some players may take leadership roles, and how this might relate to real world stuff. But to my knowledge, I'm not entirely sure if anyone has actually compared, if you are a good if you're a good World of Warcraft guild leader, are you also a good leader in the workplace? So in that sense, the answer is I don't know. So maybe you should look into it and tell me.
Oh yeah, I mean to any budding researchers out there, potential PhD topic. But I read up the CEO of some big accounting firm is going to be spending time playing World of Warcraft. It's quite time consuming.
Yeah.
All right. The question from Alan Hill: have you looked at all about what features in a game might support or detract from team cohesion, or any design principle game teams might use to increase team cohesion?
So that, yes, a little bit. So games are really unique because they are these constructed virtual spaces, right? And game behavior is largely influenced by the design of a game. So if we look at things like in League of Legends and in Overwatch and all the big mobile titles, they all try and encourage people to commend or endorse or thumbs up their teammate for being a good teammate. And these are like positive reinforcements that say like that should be motivating people to be better teammates. But that doesn't always happen and doesn't always work. But that's one instance of like how game companies are currently trying to encourage positive social behavior. But honestly, the reason why like cohesion is quite difficult in games like Dota and League and Overwatch is because of its competitive element. And I think game companies could do more in terms of emphasizing the teamwork element and the benefits of teamwork, as opposed to just like instead of just saying that it's just good for the match outcome. Yeah. So for instance, like if within a league game, you have 5 people who are part of the same team, and while you need a team to actually play the game, you don't need to be a team to play the game.
Okay.
That makes sense? So the game itself requires teams in order to play, but if you really wanted to, you don't have to play with your teammates to play.
Yeah, I mean, you will lose the game.
But, you know what? Yeah. I just want to spend this 40 minutes in this game trolling and buying a bunch of, I don't know, like clarity pots instead of
just dropping it all over the base.
Yeah, and I just want to have the enjoyment for myself. And so there's this element of like competitiveness within the team as well, because some roles have to be more self-sacrificing than others. And so then people start to get angry and think like, oh, I need this amount of kills and deaths and assists, or you shouldn't be taking any kills because you are a support kind of mentality that actually while we are part of the same team, we're not really part of the same.
Yeah. So shout out to the support players out there, like everyone needs you.
For sure. But also it also means that, but it doesn't mean that the gameplay itself should change, because I think we all play these games because we love the competitive nature of the games. But it's definitely things like external to the core gameplay that could be improved. So like in Dota, at least they have this thing called team behavior score, which people may have noticed. And that is to some extent a composite of your reports and comments that you get.
Okay.
Just a bunch of other things. So you'll be put people who are who have similar social behaviors to you.
Yeah, I mean that definitely reduced my trash talk. So actually, that's an interesting question that I have. What do you think about trash talk in games? Because we know that trash talk is very common in sports. Like particularly wrestling. Wrestling has a lot of trash talk. So do you think that there's a place for trash talk in games? And I know there's a lot of toxicity involved in it, but it's also part of the fun of the game in a way.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is that you don't know who the other person is behind the screen. Mm-hmm. So you could say something like, or you might be on the receiving end of something like, "Stop playing like a girl."
Okay, that's pretty bad. Okay, that one's pretty bad.
A girl. Or you don't know who plays as well, because like, we take for granted that everyone who plays is just like us. But it could be that you might be playing with someone who has anxiety, who might poor social skills, and therefore they're playing the game because that's their way of like interacting with the world. And so if you're trash talking, and if they're in your game, they might be much more negatively affected by it than you think. Whereas you're just like, oh, it's just a game. Once we play, it's over. So trash talk, I guess the only problem I have is that like you don't know who's behind the screen. So it's better to be nice than to be mean.
Okay, fair. I think I'll stick to GGEs.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back to the questions. Okay, you mentioned about the pilot study you did on physiological changes when playing video games. From your point of view, do we need a lot more study in that area? And is your research team currently involved in doing that? So like physiological changes.
My research team is not, well, I don't know who you mean by my research team, but there are people in my research group who do physiological work. There are a lot of people in the industry who do a lot of physiological work. Whether it's necessary, I don't know, probably for different purposes, yes. So people have done physiological research really to understand the emotional experience that games give them. And a lot of time it is done within games that have really strong narrative. So maybe if you want to understand how your game design evokes a certain emotion or evokes a certain mood, then physiological research is quite good for that. Or people have also used it to understand how the amount of workload that a game presents. So yeah, but I don't know if I can't really comment on whether we need more of it because it's not something I do very much. It's something I was piloting because I wanted to use it as a behavioral measure, an unobtrusive behavioral measure of cohesion. But it's not something I know too much about outside of what I'm trying to use it for.
Okay. I mean, just to put a comment for the person who asked the question, I actually did a bit of research on workload in terms of gaming, comparing more experienced gamers versus non-gamers. And we did find that like more experienced gamers experience a less of a workload when we look at brain imaging. So that was a master's project. It wasn't very detailed, but like just to give you a hint, like there is something there, but we don't know for sure. Do you think that the different choices of characters that a person chooses has anything to do with their working or real life behavior? So maybe like specific heroes in Dota or LOL.
So I personally, from like my own gaming, I think that like I usually play support, and I feel like that's reflective of my nature in real life as well. And there is actually a wealth of literature on like game preferences and personality or game preferences and like who you are in real life. So there is maybe some relationship there. Yeah, I don't know. There's a really nice article actually about the support players in these kind of games. If I can find it, I'll link it to you because it kind of shows how like a lot of people who play support are like nurses and doctors and people who have more supportive roles in real life.
Okay. I wonder what it says about me if I only play carry. Okay. But yeah, do link us the page. I think a lot of people want to check it out. Okay. So Ison asks, has there been any eye tracking studies on gaming and team cohesion?
Specifically on gaming and team cohesion, not that I know of. There has been eye tracking studies on player experience in games because you usually want to do that to look at the attention that a player is placing to a specific place on the screen, whether they miss a feature or something. But so I've got one friend who does a lot of eye tracking stuff, or who did a lot of eye tracking stuff, and who eventually said that eye tracking in games is very difficult because you have to control a lot for like the velocity as well, and there's too much like visual input to really know what's going on. So with all these things like eye tracking and physiology, if you do them in and of themselves, they might not be very informative because they return such noisy data. It's difficult to tease apart the signal from the noise. And so usually if you want to do these kinds of studies, you have to be very clear on why you're doing them and be very clear on what you expect to find, and also like complement them with other methods like surveys or interviews afterwards.
Yeah. All right. G Lee asks, do you know how much impact hard data has on team cohesion? Example, player A has only been a part of one kill. If they lose, people would get annoyed at player A if they lose, and possibly not when they win.
So if the context is they are a team of strangers, then it is very easy to blame your teammates. Your sense of cohesion will drop. So I know of one study, and only one, that has done research on team cohesion in Dota 2.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of a larger study on team cohesion in games. And they found that team cohesion was the most volatile in Dota 2, and it changes depending on whether the team won or lost. So like all the winning teams would report that they were super cohesive, and all the losing teams would report that they were super uncohesive. And again, this is a pure survey study. And then the question is that, okay, which way was the effect? Were they cohesive because they won, or did they win because they were cohesive? And the same thing, were they not cohesive because they lost, or were they losing, which made them feel that they were not cohesive? And
Okay.
so it's so to that question, whoever has asked it, it's a bit if you're talking about the research on team cohesion and hard data, it's difficult just to look at it, and therefore that's why I talked about using different methods. Because an ideal situation would be you'd have to go back and ask the players in that time point when this event happened, where you had lost or won. How did you feel the perception of your
all right, so very Tan, what advices would you give to psychology graduates that want to step into gaming industry or esports industry?
That's a good question. I wish more people asked me these questions. What advice? Well, I was saying earlier that it's really good to be curious. So if you study psychology or any other discipline, I guess, you need to understand or recognize how your discipline can be applied in different fields and industries. And so psychology obviously is very broad, but I did like work psychology. And so be really curious, understand like what your discipline can provide, like what you can give to the world in terms of what you already know and what you want to continue knowing. So a really good piece of advice that my supervisor, Anders, gave me before I was applying for the PhD, and he was very pivotal in the whole process. He was saying that a PhD is not just completed if you're like really intelligent. It requires a lot of a deep thirst for knowledge and a deep resolve and resilience to try and to feed that curiosity for that knowledge. So if you are in like high school or college or like undergrad and you have done some random degree that you're just like not entirely sure what you want to do with it, I would say just go and explore and find out what makes you curious. And if that is the games industry or video games in general, try and see how you can blend those two together, because I think people start to listen when you are genuinely interested in something. People will listen to what you have to offer.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. I think definitely, you don't actually have to be extremely intelligent to a PhD. Honestly, it's all about curiosity, like Evelyn pointed out, and you should definitely follow your passion earlier. So yeah, Elliot said there was a game of League of Legends where he commented, "Nice kill, good work," but people thought it was sarcastic because the tone of his voice wasn't well conveyed through the text. So the question was, how does this lack of context and anonymity of playing with random players potentially affect team cohesion versus a real life scenario where you can actually see somebody here?
Okay, so yeah, anonymity and a lack of social cues has a huge impact on how cohesion comes about. So when in face-to-face interactions in the real world team, you have two things at play. One, you have a lot of biases at play. So I see you, Anthony Bay. I've met you for the first time, and I see your face. You look like a nice boy, very kind.
Oh, thanks.
This is my stereotype and perception of you. The other thing that is at play is that when you're working in a team in an organization, for instance, you will not flame your teammates, because you know that if you flame someone, you might get reported, and then your salary might be affected, your bonuses might be affected, you might get fired. And so there are all these social constructs that constrain our behavior in the real world. And in the virtual world, especially in games that have full anonymity like League of Legends, where you don't even hear their voice, it is not only difficult to gauge what kind of people on your team, but if the team doesn't already have a pre-existing level of trust between them or pre-existing level of cohesion between them, then the things that people say, even if they are positive, might be interpreted negatively. And so like in one of my pieces of work I've already done, I looked at how I found that when people give constructive feedback or constructive criticism, even if it's unsolicited, it can be interpreted negatively purely because of the environment. But I guess this kind of means that in this kind of environment, you need to make much more effort to seem that you're coming across friendly as opposed to hostile. And that might be through a series of all your previous actions. You could be consistently encouraging throughout the game. So if you're consistently encouraging throughout the game, when you make a comment like that, then someone will be like, oh, okay, this person, yeah, it's positive.
Okay.
So there's a lot more effort that you need to make in these kind of virtual environments.
Okay. So I guess to the person that asked question, add a smiley face after nice work.
But that can also be interpreted as negative.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've done that to trash talk people.
It's like a history. So when teams function, the history of events that happen within a team really shape the culture and the tone and the culture and the tone of a team. And so there's some work out there on how like really early interactions in a team shape the rest of the team's life.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of true because when you first meet strangers and you're first in a team with them, the first few interactions will already give you, if you have no other information about them, except for that interaction, that's what you're going to think all the future interactions is going to be about, because that's the only information you have about them to predict their future behavior. And so as humans, that's kind of what we do. We like to make sure that we can predict things. And that's why we have stereotypes.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And I do spam well played quite a lot, like sarcastically. All right, so Kimberly, that's a really good question that I think a lot of you might actually wonder. How different is your master's degree and PhD in terms of workload? What do you plan to do after finishing your PhD? So there are two separate questions.
So the master's, because it was 1 year, it was a lot more intense, but it was like not very difficult.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't very difficult. I think because that was still a lot more like classes and a lot more, you write essays and you do little projects and stuff. Whereas with a PhD, it is, in terms of workload, the workload depends on how much you want to do. I'm sure you also feel the same. But it feels a lot more stressful because this time you're on your own completely. So there's no like grades that you need to get, and the feedback that you get for your work is a lot slower as well. So you like 6 months or 1 year doing something and only find out whether that time spent was well worth it. And I'm sure you would would feel it even more. So in terms of workload, it's just as much as or as little as you want it to be, the minimum being that you finish your PhD. What happens after I finish my PhD? So earlier in our conversation, Anthony and I were talking about what would happen. And I am, at least my intention is to go into industry and not stay within academia. So my ideal situation would be to do continue doing research on teams or player behavior, preferably in teams, but within academia within industry as opposed to staying on doing a postdoc or lecturing or something. I'm not about the teaching life. I'm a horrible teacher. So it could be within research, and I guess also because of my background in team psychology in general, it could be within making organizations better, helping organizations have better teams, or help their teams develop to become more effective teams. So that's at the organizational level, and I guess like if I stay within games, it would be at understanding how do you make players' experiences better when they work in team-based games. It could even be within esports. So within esports, obviously, it's huge right now, and there are lots of teams there, and it's becoming more and more common to see professional esports teams hire psychologists to help the mentality of their team members. And so if esports is treated like a regular sports team as well, and they will soon be needing psychologists as well to help them with their mentality and to in their hiring process and their training process.
Well, I think thanks so much for sharing your experience today. I think a lot of people can learn a lot about that. And I think on the topic on like the PhD and workload, I think one thing really special about PhD is because everyone's studying something so different. It is very different, everyone's experience, and it's very hard to model over someone's experience. So I remember this professor came out and said that a PhD is a very lonely career, but a very noble career. And after doing it, I see what he means. It's very different, and it can be a bit lonely sometimes because sometimes no one else is doing what you're doing, which is a good thing. But all right. So Jason Fong asked, does language play a role in team cohesion, especially in a Southeast Asia server? We have like from Malay, Chinese, Indian, Thai, many more, especially when they speak. type of different language, and then stereotypes that go they are included with that.
So it may affect the stereotypes that you have about people, but in all these games, they are meant to be played by people all across the world. And I think the general, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the general like chat wheel and pings, so pings have no text language. It is all semantically imbued. It means like it's a symbol that has a meaning, so everyone knows what the symbol means. And then all the chat wheel chats, at least in Dota, they're all in English. At least the
There's
main,
some in Filipino, if I'm not mistaken, because of
so with the chat. So with the chat wheels in Dota, like the first 80 of them are all instructional content. So like things about coordination and GG well played. Whereas the everything else after the first 80 chat wheel comments are like random things like seep and moo and like Chinese words.
Yeah.
I don't know. I recently started playing Dota again and I've just been boggled by the.
So just to add to that point, so the team OG from Dota has been recently popularizing chat views as a sort of psychological tactic against other teams, and you can see from the TI it actually worked pretty well. So I do think that with the whole language thing, it's a very complex area because like you don't actually understand what it means to the language, what language means to actually feel what the player is trying to tell you.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
So Mallory also
might make it a bit difficult for research though, but that's
yeah, that's a good point. You're making Evelyn's life much harder, but okay, so Mary asks, what makes team cohesion win the game? Is it communication, talent, synergy?
Yeah, all the above. Well, it's mostly, so given the context that everyone is functioning in, say you are a stranger with a fellow team of 4 other strangers, and you have no idea about anything about them, it's better to give them the benefit of the doubt. So you really, for a team to be cohesive, skill is definitely one thing that's involved. So like everyone must play out their role effectively. But then because the state of the team is very fragile, if someone makes a mistake, you don't want to punish them for it. You don't want to punish your own teammate for it. Because if you punish your own teammate for it, then especially at the start, that will only do more poorly for their mentality. And you don't want people to start inting. You want them to continue to be committed to the task and continue to keep working with everyone else and keep trying. And so, communicating is good. Having talent or like skill and competence is good. And having synergy, that's more of like, I believe you mean like naturally coordinated people. That's a bit harder because that's like sort of like a dice roll. If you end up with someone who just naturally knows how to predict your moves, that's great. But if you don't, then there's a lot more effort in trying to coordinate your actions.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of patience, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and being really encouraging. That's quite a good way to develop team cohesion.
Okay. I think that's a good answer for you. So okay, just last question. If I may ask, are you planning to work in the UK or Malaysia? Which country has better opportunities, at least in this particular domain for esports and games?
So on the first one, but when I'm planning to work in the UK or Malaysia, actually I don't really mind. I go where the opportunity is open. Which country has better opportunities in the domain of esports and games? So I can't really comment on that because I'm gonna be honest, I haven't really been familiarizing myself with what's happening in like Southeast Asia, but I know that there is a huge esports company or a growing esports company called EVOS that is on the rise. And obviously like you already know of some Southeast Asian players who have made it into international teams. So I don't really know, unfortunately.
Okay. So, but yeah, thanks so much for that great answer. Just to wrap it up for some fun questions. I think I saw in some of the chat group, they asked what's your rank on LOL and Dota.
You'll never know.
All right, well, I tried, guys. All right, so let's wrap it up. So, like I thank you so much for taking your time out this Saturday to speak to the audience, and I'd like to thank everyone that joined today. For participating in this session. I think it's great that everyone's listening to what's going on with gaming research. So next week you can look forward to Lim Kai Siang, who is doing a PhD in social genetics and developmental psychiatry research. I personally know the guy, and I think his research is great. He's looking at underlying causes of self-harm behaviors in their relationships with mental health conditions. So, tune in next week and you'll get to see what Kai Sang has to say. Right. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, see you next Saturday.
See you next Saturday.